Speaking of things women can't control about their own bodies, menopause, that special time in a woman's life that marks the end of her childbearing years and the beginning of society treating her like a used-up old hag.
I am not dying, Rose, but I might as well be. It's menopause.
My client pleads not guilty by reason of temporary insanity brought upon by menopause. You know, when women parts dry up and the hormones start swirling around like...
I know what menopause is.
Oh, you know what menopause is? Name 5 of its albums, bro. Menopause is a natural, universal phase of life, but because there's so much stigma, it gets a bad rap. And unfortunately, I mean that literally.
My menopause hits me hard, makes me say, oh my lord, I don't feel good most of the time. I'm tired, weak, confused, and fried. I ache, I itch, so I say to thee, don't touch me.
Okay, menopause doesn't actually mean your life is over, but in that woman's case, maybe it should. Each year, an estimated 1.3 million U.S. women enter menopause, but because of all the shame and stigma, we treat it like the vodka bottle hidden in Aunt Mildred's bathroom.
How many of you felt prepared for menopause?
None.
No one.
Not fully prepared.
In my family, no one talked about it. They just soldiered on.
You remember grandma kind of getting sweaty, or you remember your mom being kind of grouchy, but they didn't talk to us about it.
We all need to talk at about the age of 40. You know, what to expect when you're not expecting. So if you...
Well, tonight I am giving that talk, although mine is more in the spirit of Judy Blume's lesser-known classic, F You, God, It's Me Margaret Again. Menopause is the loss of ovarian reproductive function, and technically it's just one day, the 1-year anniversary of your final period, traditionally celebrated as the bloodless tampon anniversary. What most people describe as menopause is actually perimenopause, the transition period leading up to that date. It's sometimes described as puberty in reverse, although I wouldn't say it's that bad because you still get to keep your boobs and pubes, but still, it blows.
Night sweats, you're gaining weight, tired, brain fog.
Irregular periods, raging hot flashes, sleep disturbances, mood changes.
Women will come in and say, I feel like I'm going crazy.
It's going to be next to impossible to have the same interest in sex that you did when you were in your 20s and 30s.
Joke's on you, I didn't have any interest in sex in my 20s and 30s. Well, technically, I was interested, but no one would tell me what it was. And as if the hot flashes and loss of horniness aren't bad enough, menopause can also increase your risk for serious diseases like osteoporosis and heart disease. One of the most frustrating parts about menopause is that there's no concrete way to predict when it will start or how long symptoms last. Unlike your first period, which you can test for by wearing white pants to middle school on the one day you don't have a jacket to tie around your waist. There is no single blood, saliva, or urine test that can accurately determine whether or not a person is close to their last period. Perimenopause usually lasts about 7 years, but it can also take as long as 14 because God is not real. Or if she is, she's one of those stuck-up bitches who hates other women and calls herself a guy's gal. But even though a lot of mystery surrounding menopause still exists, we've come a long way. Before the word menopause was coined in the 1820s, it was known colloquially as women's hell or death of sex, which I just learned is not the same as the movie Death to Smoochie. And like every women's health problem in the Victorian era, doctors just chalked it all up to women be crazy.
Ye old doctors of yore actually thought the womb would just detach itself and wander around the body, and that's what caused illness in women.
The word hysteria comes from the Greek word for uterus.
Even now, we still refer to the removal of the uterus as a hysterectomy. Come on, isn't it time to change it to hersterectomy? Girl power. Into the 19th century, doctors believed there was a link between the womb and the brain that made all women susceptible to hysteria. An onslaught of madness was considered inevitable for women ages 45 to 50, though they also believed it could be brought on early by receiving bad news or working in unwomanly occupations like as fishwives or late-night hosts. They also genuinely believed that menopausal women grew scales on their breasts, which leads me to believe that Victorian doctors thought fishwives were actual fish. Unsurprisingly, treatments were just as bonkers. Some doctors prescribed leeching to relieve congested genitals and advised against activities like reading novels or going to parties and dancing. Although once the Macarena swept the globe, all the genital leeching in the world couldn't save them. And if all else failed, the most logical treatment was to lock women up in asylums. It was the original lock her up. And weirdly, the t-shirts back then had Hillary Clinton on them too. It wasn't until the 20th century that scientists discovered estrogen and somewhat clarified its role in menopause. And by the 80s, we started seeing legitimate studies. Unfortunately, one of the most widely reported overstated the risks of hormone therapy in connection to heart attacks, strokes, and breast cancer. It wasn't until 2005 that we stopped classifying menopause as a disease and started treating it like it is, a normal phase of life, like puberty or writing Major Dad fan fiction. And today, we know hormone therapy is an effective treatment option. But of course, first you have to find a doctor who actually knows what they're talking about. Lots of doctors are still hesitant decades later to prescribe hormones. And frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if some doctors also still think they have to check you for breast scales. But even if your doctor has bothered to read a medical journal in the last few decades, they still might not believe you.
It's been called the Me Too of healthcare. Doctors misdiagnosing, dismissing, even gaslighting their female patients.
There's great data about kind of women and issues related to implicit bias, right? So their complaints not being taken seriously. Doctors don't pay enough attention to women.
Studies showed bias against women, especially those of color, is a problem across healthcare.
There is ample evidence of gender and racial bias in medicine, especially for Black women. For example, while Black women have a higher risk of experiencing hot flashes, they're less likely to be offered hormone replacement, and even if they are, they're usually asked to show a receipt for the hormones as they walk out the door. Another problem is that most doctors aren't even trained for menopause. Only 7% of residents said they felt prepared to treat menopausal women, and about 20% said they had no menopause training at all. That is insane. Even my first summer job at Tim Hortons made me watch a menopause training video. Your best hope for relief is working with a menopause practitioner, and you can find one near you through the North American Menopause Society. Although, unless you live near a major metropolitan area, good luck with that. For example, in Wyoming, there are only 2 in the entire state, and they're both cows. Wyoming, why? They're not even best friend cows. They hate each other. Treatment can also be prohibitively expensive and may not be covered by health insurance plans, which means many people either have to suffer in silence or pay for over-the-counter treatments that may not even work.
A large percentage of women do use alternative or over-the-counter products for menopausal symptoms. A lot of products that are over-the-counter are not FDA approved, and there's really very little data for whether they work or not.
You're better off going back to Victorian genital leeching. At least the leeches have a chance of stimulating you. Look, menopause sucks, but women's hell doesn't have to be the actual center of hell. If there were less stigma surrounding menopause, we'd have way more research, way better treatments, and way fewer doctors whose prescription for everything is just keep your tits on. But of course, all of that would require us to actually care about and respect women. If menopause happened to men, there'd already be 5 FDA-approved pills that would put them to sleep from ages 45 to 51, and they'd wake up with a refreshing boner and a pay raise. It is nutballs that in 2022, we're still so ashamed to talk about this thing that half the population will experience. Daring to live a life past 45 is nothing to be embarrassed about. Unless your life is this.
Stop! Menno time.
Actually, I take that back. I'm starting to like her.